Good morning and welcome to the JAFFA Wire podcast. I am, of course, the Bold Like a Leopard channel, and today we're going to talk about this new impeachment inquiry that's been launched by House Republicans in order to supposedly remove Joe Biden from the office of President of the United States. Basically, it's something that I think almost everyone has acknowledged is going to be a fruitless endeavor. The reason being that, just like with what happened under President Trump, he was impeached, and supposedly the Democrats wanted to remove him from office in 2020, early 2020. They started their impeachment inquiry the previous fall, and of course, the effort went down in flames because I believe there were only 2 Republican senators who were willing to join in and vote for impeachment. I think that they were Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski, if memory serves me well. And what they needed was for there to be a significant critical mass. So they would need. They would have needed, I think, something like 18 Republicans to defect and vote to impeach President Trump in the Senate. And with the Democrats, it's going to be much harder for the Republicans to accomplish that. I don't see people like Chris Murphy or Kyrsten Sinema even, or Joe Manchin, or I don't see any of those people who are known Democrats in the Senate standing on principle and deciding, hey, we might be Democrats, but the accusations here and the proof that's been presented for them are enough for us to vote for removal from office. I don't even know if the Democratic senators are going to pay attention during this impeachment trial if it happens. But we're not even at that stage. So an impeachment works this way. The House has to authorize standing committees to, or I think they have to be permanent committees. I think there's a difference between the two. But they have to authorize permanent committees to open an impeachment inquiry against the president. And that's been done. That was yesterday. So, step one done. You have Kevin McCarthy went before the press yesterday and said that he authorized it. Now, Alan Dershowitz, I'm going to get to him soon. I'm also going to talk a little bit about one of his other opinions that he gave in the same video. He says, well, the House actually has to vote to give them those powers. So I'm not sure about that. He could be correct about that. I'm not sure if he's correct about some of his other statements about impeachment. He has an opinion. His opinion is usually well-grounded. I don't compare myself to Alan Dershowitz in terms of knowledge of the law and the Constitution, but I do think that sometimes he is, he's presenting a case as a matter of defense as opposed to a matter of explanation, so that it's not really an issue with his credentials. It's an issue with, do I agree that he is presenting this argument from an informed or honest standpoint? Because sometimes I think his biases do tend to creep out. Not to say that he's the worst, but I see it sometimes. Anyway, so the next step, of course, would be the conduction of the conduction of the impeachment inquiry, and that's going to be, who knows how long that process is. So the committees then have the ability to appoint, special investigators who will be, they will be filing subpoenas in order to get documents relating to the matter of impeachment. Now, why is it that we are in an impeachment scenario in the first place? I'm not talking about what the crime is, because I'll get to that soon. Well, how did we get to that point? Well, what's happened is that Republicans and others who are critical of the Democrats, because there are people who consider themselves to be left-wing populists or progressives. There's people who are libertarians. It's not only Republicans who have a problem with Joe Biden. The fact is that he has many critics who are aware that what he's done in terms of having his son act as his executor in terms of these business deals with foreign corporations and foreign governments, that would constitute bribery. Okay, so I guess I did already go into the crime itself. But why are we at impeachment? Because the special counsel that was appointed to investigate that has proven to be inadequate. In fact, there's still conjecture, even now. I think technically this would be 3 to 4 years later. There's still conjecture as to whether David Weiss is a special counsel at all, whether he has the powers, right? People don't even know to this day whether, I think officially he's been given the powers by Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, to file charges in jurisdictions that are not his own. His district is Delaware. So, and to investigate and file subpoenas there in other jurisdictions. So, I'm not saying that today he's not empowered with those powers. But what was so bizarre was when that plea deal collapsed in July, the one that would have basically given Hunter Biden no jail time. It would have given him a couple misdemeanors for crimes that could have been charged as felonies. What happened? So they appointed David Weiss as a special counsel, but since then, it's almost like they've started from square one. And while he said, David Weiss, that he's going to file an indictment of Hunter Biden on the gun charge, okay, well, he already did that one time, right? So we're talking about the special counsel behaving like everything is the hourglass is starting to run out, and they're acting like they're putting together a new sculpture of the thinker, right? They're just taking their sweet old time. They don't have any issue with the fact that some of those crimes are the crimes that may be left over. They're going to exhaust their statute of limitations. This is all just a mess. It's just a mess. The way that the Justice Department from the beginning has conducted this special counsel investigation. And I wrote an article a couple months, I think it was last month, talking about how the Department of Justice should no longer be in charge of special counsel investigations. We need a permanent special counsel service that will address cases like this, not just cases relating to the president, but cases relating to other politically involved targets, right? Because we can't necessarily trust the Justice Department to be totally impartial when it comes to these cases. We've seen enough already. There have been whistleblowers that came out and they said that the Justice Department had, and the IRS had, all of the information they needed in order to charge Hunter Biden with tax crimes and other felonies, and they've basically foot dragged it. And some would say that were it not for the whistleblowers, Gary Shapley and I think the other guy's name is Jacob Siegel. So if it wasn't for those two IRS whistleblowers, there is a lot of conjecture that the charges would have never even been filed, period. Not even the ones that were pleaded down to slaps on the wrist. So I'm sorry to say that with that issue coming to the fore, a lot of people are saying, well, the only option is impeachment. Now, when it comes to Alan Dershowitz, so his position has always been, and I think he's been consistent on that the impeachment process cannot be abused for political purposes. And that means that he, obviously he opposed the Clinton impeachment. I think he had a good reason to oppose the Clinton impeachment from his standpoint. I think that definitely the way that, they impeached him for perjury relating to these sexual favors that he lied about and under oath. Okay. But in the grand scheme of things, a lot of the other things that Clinton did were much more impeachable than what happened with regards to Monica Lewinsky. The fact of the matter is that he perjured himself, right? So this is, so whatever you want to say, he perjured himself. Do we want to remove the president from office for perjury? I think that, many people, not just Alan Dershowitz, have argued with merit that, perjury is absolutely wrong, but it does not rise to the level of an impeachable offense. And there are people who say that no, for somebody like that who is a law professor, Clinton he got his start as a law professor, and somebody who is supposed to be the person who is trusted with the most crucial job in America and across the world, the President of the United States, for them to commit perjury and to willfully deceive the American people in order to avoid being embarrassed, they would say that yes, it is impeachable. So I would say the Clinton impeachment was weak from the standpoint of which crime was used as the reason to impeach him. When it came to Donald Trump, I think it was even weaker because they could never even point to any action that he took that could be construed to be a crime. Okay? All they were saying was that he was manipulating the presidential office for political gain by trying to strong-arm Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky using the specter of withholding aid in exchange for Zelensky agreeing to turn over information relating to Joe Biden's corrupt dealings there. Okay, so at the time, Biden was not yet a political candidate for 2020. Later, he did declare, but there was speculation that he would never come back. But by the way, it still should be surprising that somebody who at the time, I think he was 78 years old, who in their right mind thought that Biden would be able to win in 2020. A lot of people were saying, well, this guy is way, way, way over the hill. And people were looking at totally other people that would be the candidate to go up against Trump. A lot of Democrats, for whatever reason, were enthusiastic about Pete Buttigieg. There were Democrats who were, surprised. They were saying Beto O'Rourke would be so this notion that this was an abuse of power when Biden hadn't even declared his candidacy, and even within the speculation, people were not really reckoning him to be the leading candidate because of his age and because he had been skipped over by the party in order to put Hillary Clinton into the office. So no, I don't think that what Donald Trump did was illegal. I also don't think it was wrong. And in retrospect, I think the biggest problem with what happened was that we were supplying military aid to Ukraine to begin with. I think that Trump should have stepped in and said, hey, we're not going to really be involved with this unless you want us to broker an agreement, because really the United States cannot act as this proxy patron. Okay, we're gonna effectively Ukraine is the proxy, the U.S. is the patron. It's not in the American interest to do that, and we want to foster more relations with other countries around the world. That means we're not going to be involved in these conflicts. That's something Trump did not have the courage to do, or maybe he didn't do it because he would be accused again of being a Russian puppet, which was what hounded him during the first half of his presidency. So Dershowitz's complaint about this is that he doesn't really believe that we're talking about an impeachable offense here. Okay? And I want to make it clear that I am arguing against that, not from the standpoint of political opposition to Biden. But I do have, but it's not because I'm some big Trump supporter. In fact, I don't know to this day who I'll support in 2020 in terms of the primary. I really couldn't tell you. But Biden is, there is an impeachable offense. It would be bribery. If and I'm going to try to say this as succinctly as possible. If it becomes conclusive that the monies that made their way to Hunter Biden through, they were paid by Burisma, they were paid by these other Chinese companies. If it is established that they made it from Hunter Biden to Joe Biden, that would be bribery. And in fact, some of the stuff that they're investigating currently, including the process by which Biden and the State Department and all those all the American institutions that were involved in this, that they caused the firing of Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating Burisma. If it is established that that was a quid pro quo, a real quid pro quo, unlike what was all over the news 4 years ago when it came to Trump, if it is shown that, yes, the Ukrainians were strong-armed into firing Viktor Shokin because Burisma decided to offer money to the Bidens for them to do that, then that is bribery. It's simple as that. And that is impeachable because, and by the way, this is American intervention in the internal administration of another country. That's worse, significantly, than Donald Trump talking about withholding aid to Ukraine. Also, what was said about Trump was that it was for political gain. It was in order to dig up dirt on Biden. Okay, so that, if you want to say that, then that's stick to it, right? In my opinion, what Trump was doing was he was getting the dirt in order to hand it over and destroy Biden legally. He would have been able to, and then there would have been an investigation that what happened potentially from the Justice Department standpoint, that they would have gotten involved in and gone after Biden because of this very crime that now he's able to skirt because his appointees are in control of the Justice Department. If Trump had been in office and been able to use this information and give it to the prosecutors, okay, then it would become a big question. Like when is it political? When is it just the execution of the legal procedure, right? But in my opinion, it wasn't simply in order to win the election. That's what I'm saying. That Trump was doing this because he did believe that what Biden did was crooked, illegal, and corrupt, and that he wanted there to be consequences for it, or at least for it to be exposed. But that's a very Rorschach test argument. Okay, I can make the argument that it was because he wanted to actually go after Biden in terms of crimes that he'd committed, and somebody who looks at it differently, somebody who is a real Trump critic would say that it was because he wanted to get political gain out of it. So it's not an easy argument to win people over who are convinced on the other side. But what Dershowitz is getting wrong, as I've explained, is that if the allegations are true and Biden benefited financially from what Hunter Biden was doing, and we've established that he's aware of a lot of what was going on, that would be bribery because Hunter Biden could not have gotten the Prosecutor General of Ukraine fired. That much is known. And yet, people are here today in 2023 trying to make this this leap of faith that Biden got the prosecutor fired because he was concerned about corruption in Ukraine. But the fact is that when have we ever seen the vice president of the United States go to another country and tell them, hey, your prosecutor is crooked, we need you to replace them? It's not, even if it did happen, it wouldn't be considered within the normal realm of what the vice president of the United States is supposed to do. We're not auditing other countries' legal and judicial processes and their transparency and their corruption. That's not the job of the vice president. Now, it's obviously a big problem, but we don't have a vice president. You understand? We didn't have, who was the vice president under Bush? We didn't have Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was a terrible person, terrible human being. Is I'm not saying was. I'm saying was a guy. I mean, he's still alive, and he was, But when he was vice president, he was a terrible, terrible human being. But I want to make this clear: we didn't have Dick Cheney fly to other countries and demand that they fire officials in the prosecution services. Okay, we now, if there were other American officials who would do those things, that's something else that I would consider. I would say those are also a big issue, but it's not that's not that's definitely not the vice president's job. So that's one aspect of it, but and then there's all the other areas where we see that Hunter Biden has received financial rewards, and they had to have been conditional on certain certain deliverables, right? You work for somebody, you have deliverables. That's what they call them when I was when I was starting out in the corporate world, just as a what do you call it, as a co-op. They would say, hey, you have deliverables on this. You have to do this in order to help the team. So what was Hunter Biden's deliverable? He would do X, and they would pay him whatever they'd agreed to. And who would help him to do that? Well, a lot of the things he said he could deliver on, he couldn't do himself. A lot of them were conditional on U.S. policy that would have been steered in order to do that. Now, how would he have influenced the U.S. policy? He would have had to go to somebody who could do those things. And who could do those things? Apparently Joe Biden. He couldn't do them directly necessarily, but he could definitely, Biden's influence within the government certainly greater than Hunter Biden's. Joe Biden's was greater than Hunter Biden's. That's all that I'm saying. So this notion that Alan Dershowitz is saying, well, it's not an impeachable offense, whatever he did. No, it is bribery. And there's another thing that he said before I get into some other thoughts, okay? There's another thing that Dershowitz said. He's somebody that I am inclined to listen to because I think there's a wealth of knowledge there that people could learn about. A lot of people who don't work within the legal realm, they're completely ignorant about how anything works. People are very, civics hasn't been taught in decades, so people are unaware of how the U.S. government works, how these things happen, what administrative law is, what's the difference between constitutional amendments and a regular law. So that's one of the reasons that I tend to listen to Alan Dershowitz in order to get some perspective on some of these legal questions. When he talks about the Second Amendment, I feel like he's talking from a deep position of bias. Yesterday, he actually said that that the Second Amendment is not meant to protect the public from a tyrannical government. Okay, so that's a perspective that I've heard from people, and he, because somebody had written him a letter that said, well, don't you think that firearms that the Second Amendment is meant so that the people can defend themselves from an unjust and unconstitutional government? And Dershowitz said no, that it is illegal, that it is treason to rebel against an unconstitutional, abusive government that is persecuting them. And then, later after a couple of thoughts, he said, well, I suppose though that if this was an issue of the Nazis coming to your door and ready to kill you, yes, then because he said it was because of self-defense or whatever. But he's basically saying the same thing. The Nazis generally would not come to your house and kill you right there. Many times they would simply detain people and put them in a camp. That was something that came up during the same response that he gave to the letter. He was saying, well, the Japanese internees in the detainment camps, that was terrible, but they shouldn't have resisted when they were, to suggest that they should have resisted when they were arrested is absurd or whatever. But he said, well, it's not comparable to concentration camps. Well, when people were taken to the concentration camps, they didn't know that they were concentration camps. That's his error, that he's trying to say with the benefit of hindsight that these are different situations and that you cannot compare on the same scale the Japanese internment camps and the Holocaust. Well, the people at the time didn't know that. The Japanese, for all they knew, they could have been taken into a field and shot, right? That's the big problem. That when you're detained, you have to sort of take it on faith that you're not going to be abused by the people that are detaining you. And that's one of the reasons I think that Dershowitz, I think he has, a lot of great knowledge and thoughts and perspective, but he's still at heart a very institutionalist liberal, and he doesn't understand that the United States might have a great history of good good developments in terms of civilization and how we've evolved as a government and a people and a nation. But that can be undone, and he's watching it before him. He doesn't recognize it. So that's the big problem that I have with people who are, they still consider themselves liberals, not necessarily leftists. You have to, go to your window, look outside, and realize that you may be living in a better situation than the rest of the country, but the country as a whole is doing terrible. As I'm driving right now, I'm right now in a rural area in the country. There's actually a fence on my left. I can see like some trees and whatever. It looks great. It looks like a very great scene. I drive this way every day. I love driving from my inner suburb to the rural area where I work in a factory because I like the scenery. But that's not a reflection of America and its problems. And I think that Alan Dershowitz has a similar issue. He lives in a relatively good situation. He's a retired law professor with royalties that are coming from various books and things like that. He's not a person who has to worry about the day-to-day struggles that a lot of Americans in the middle and lower classes have to. But on top of that, as a Massachusetts resident, like, how can he not think, what the hell has President Biden done, right? Because who would have thought that Massachusetts would declare an emergency over migrant conditions, right? There's migrants who are just pouring into Massachusetts and overloading its social services departments, and they can't handle it. And the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, who is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, she's the first lesbian, I think there might be 2 lesbian governors. But anyway, so there's a perfect situation, eh? But anyway, so she's considered as reliable of a liberal as there is, and she's saying that there's a migrant crisis in Massachusetts, in neighboring New York. Okay, the state government has declared emergencies. The city of New York is in a real crisis that they are making headlines daily. Chicago has a migrant crisis. You have, I think, New Jersey has also declared a migrant crisis. I'm not hearing anything about Connecticut or Rhode Island, but there's a significant number of states that are saying, well, what's happened? We are having these migrants just pouring in. We can't handle them. They have nowhere to go. There's no housing, right? You don't have people show up and there's just places for them to stay, right? So they have to put them up in hotels sometimes. And when the hotels overflow, where do you put them then? There was that scene from New York with the Roosevelt Hotel where people were sleeping on sidewalks. And that's the result of the Biden administration. That's the result of their policy. That's what they do. They don't care, and they're actually turning the other cheek, the Bidens. And I'm not talking about the cheek on their face. They're showing their ass to the people of New York. They're saying, yeah, this is the policy, and you deal with it. They're not offering any help to Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, who himself is, he has his own issues. How he got this to this point. He doesn't really seem to take any responsibility. That's the big problem with liberal thought. Dan Bongino talks about it often on his show. He says it's the and then what question, that liberals will often advocate for a policy they see as fair, just, and equitable, but they don't want to address what will be the result of that policy and how they'll have to deal with it. And this is one of those situations. The liberal American does not want to address how they got to the point where you have migrant emergencies in all of these cities. And the reason is because they would have to point at themselves. They would have to say, yeah, I voted for these policies and I voted for the people. I gave my trust to these people, and they said things would be they first of all, I don't even think that they said things would be fine. They just said this is the right thing to do. That's the biggest problem, that people like to say that, there's that there's that hokey line that they always say, that this is not us. When it came to the migrant crisis, they were talking about when there were those horsebacked Border Patrol agents who were rounding up Haitians, and they were saying this cannot be the face of American policy in the 20. They look like slave catchers and stuff like that. So that's the privilege of people who not only have they never had to be at the border and round up illegals, they've never actually had to deal with any of this. They've never had to, the only position where they would be dealing with illegals is if they're the people who are paying them to do work for them, right? And they're not paying them a living wage anyway. They're paying them basically a pittance, because these migrants are often willing to work for a lower wage. So that's the big problem with liberalism. And I'm not talking about leftism. I think leftists, for what it's worth, they don't care. They'll openly say that the reason that we need to leave the border open is because the U.S. has caused the crisis in these countries, right? They don't care. They're like, well, it's really the fault of America for embargoing Cuba or whatever it is. That's America's fault. So they don't want to deal with the result. They just want to place blame and say that it's America's fault. Now, so that's a different problem with leftists. But liberals will say that the just policy is to allow these people to come in and give them asylum, and they don't care that there's only so many people that you can bring in before your infrastructure is going to feel the consequences. So that's just one area where I think Dershowitz he could open his eyes and see that it's the fault of people like him. It's the fault of people who have comfortable lives and thriving careers, and they've made their money, and they don't have to worry about tomorrow whether their child will have let's say that their child is on the softball team, the girls' softball team, and she's going to be facing a guy who is he's basically like 6'5" and has the arm of Nolan Ryan, but he pitches underhand, right? So that's what they should be worrying about, but they don't care, because they don't see their issue is that in liberalism, everything is meant to be something that is creating equity and justice for everyone. There's no practicality about it, right? That's one of the reasons, I live in an area, I live in a school district where they just seem to say, well, all we have to do is, give more funding to this program, to this district, to this, to this issue, and that's really what we need. We don't need any scrutiny over how that money is being used, but all we know is that we're not getting the money we need, and we need it. right? That's the big issue with them, that they think it's only an issue of allocation of resources. That's not true. When you look at how money is spent, and the intent might be there, but the execution might be totally flawed. That's an issue that they just cannot face. Yesterday, there was an announcement that billions of dollars, or I think it was hundreds of billions of dollars, of COVID-19 unemployment aid was abused, right? So that's on top of the money that was properly used. So people then ask, well, how is it that inflation ballooned in the past couple years? In fact, I heard that inflation is supposed to go up again. By the way, oil is going up, so I think by default inflation has to go up. The only question is how far it will go. So they don't want to address that. All they want to address is this is a crisis. We need to face it. We need to meet this moment. That's one of the big problems. They never want to look beyond the moment and say, what impact is that going to have long term? Because what they see often is these protesting people. Often they're younger protesters, and they want to look like they're in it to look after the interests of the youth. So, they'll just do what they say, right? This is why this climate change agenda is going so hard right now. They don't want to look at the impact of any of it. So, I know that I started this out, it would be about impeachment. I don't think, obviously, that the impeachment is going to lead to conviction, but I think that something has to be done. There has to be some mechanism to hold the president accountable in the United States, and currently it doesn't look like there is one, right? There is no, so the special counsel is clearly inadequate. Dershowitz himself said that in his response. I know that I'm talking about Dershowitz a lot. That's not the only source that you can go to, but I would say that you need there to be a way for Americans to deal with a president who has both betrayed his oath of office by committing crimes with the way that Joe Biden may have. And you also need to have an avenue for, holding them accountable if their policies are going terribly. There has to be a way to do that. And, to wait 4 years for an election, I think can often be too big of a price to pay. Now, that's just the constitutional system that we have. I don't have a better alternative right now. So I wanted to add on this last section because the main part of this video I taped at the beginning of the day, and then I found out during the course of the day that there's a new news story, which is that Ian Sams, who is a White House communications department person, I think he's basically the spokesperson for the White House Counsel, which is the legal department of the White House. He has put out, first of all, he's put out statements that were directly condemning House Republicans for their effort to impeach President Biden. But on top of that, he has apparently sent a letter to media companies, including the New York Times, CNN, and I believe Fox is included. I don't know about MSNBC. I don't know whether they were on the list, but apparently he was supposed to send a letter. I don't know whether the letter was sent or whether it's still going to be sent to these media companies, where it would ask for them to look into and expose what he classifies as the lies of the House impeachment inquiry into President Biden. So this adds a new dimension, and I'm going to keep going on the rant even after I get through this topic. This adds on to the reasons that there has to be a mechanism to hold the Biden administration accountable for these actions, for things like this, because it's not as if this is a campaign aide who is doing this or one of Biden's relatives. By the way, Hunter Biden has also filed a lawsuit against Garrett Ziegler, who is the person who published the Hunter Biden laptop contents as part of the Marco Polo organization's expose of him. So Ian Sams is a federal employee. He works for the White House. And what he's doing by
steering the media to engage in basically the work that the White House needs to do itself is both a violation of the First Amendment, because it is basically the state telling the media what to do. A person who is not elected, Ian Sams, he's not representative of the people. He works for the White House. That's about the only credential that he has. Otherwise, what? So, by the way, it would have actually been better if he would have just been some Joe Schmo out of nowhere. You know, he would say, well, you need to do your work to defend President Biden because, you know, this is totally wrong, right? You can definitely, if you're a private citizen, you can petition the media just like you can petition anyone else to deal with a problem that you think is you know, any problem, right? But when you're representing the White House as in an official capacity, and if this is true, okay, so I don't know whether this letter was already sent. Apparently, Oliver Darcy from CNN has confirmed that there was a letter, so that would make it seem that they already sent the letter. This is another abuse of power that the White House is telling media companies, steering them on how to cover this impeachment inquiry. Because, and let's understand what's been happening in the recent past. I think it was this past week. I think it was Friday that there was a circuit court ruling of the Fifth Circuit against the Biden administration, and it was I believe Missouri versus I don't remember who. Maybe it was Missouri versus the Department of Homeland Security. I don't remember which agency was the defendant, but basically a circuit court, one rung below the Supreme Court, has found that the Biden administration actively censored users on social media illegally against the First Amendment protections that are afforded to every citizen in this country. So they've already violated that. Now we're having them directly go to media companies and try to tell them how to cover a topic, okay? Now, I think the response will be, well, we didn't tell them to do it. We strongly suggested that they tell the truth, and we were just advocating on our own behalf or whatever. It doesn't work that way when you have people who are in an official state capacity. When let's say the mayor was to call down to the local paper and he would say, I don't want you to get any doubts about what happened with this whole scandal that happened where I took money from developers. So I want you to fact check these law enforcement agencies or the city council that might be, that would be considered deeply unethical. An executive, okay, whether it is the mayor, whether it's somebody in the mayor's office, they are not supposed to, you know, in such a way, engage with the media to try to compel them how to cover a story, right? And we have to bear in mind that this administration has a long, deep-seated hostility towards the media. People like to talk about how Donald Trump was threatening the free press, and it was actually a bunch of garbage, in my opinion. All he would do was give his opinion on the press and call them fake news. He would call them names. He would disparage them. And if you want to say it's not presidential to disparage and disrespect the press, that's one thing, but it's not the same thing as steering the press to cover your administration in a certain way. And recently there was an attempt by, I think it was a reporter from the AP, to get an answer to a question that he had to a State Department spokesperson, where he was asking exactly how it was that the State Department ended up sponsoring research into coronavirus development in order, gain of function research in at the Wuhan coronavirus lab, and the spokesperson basically waved away the question. He said, I'm not going to engage on the topic, and he issued a denial that was not a denial. He was basically saying that question is not really meant for this forum, and he basically waved away the question. This is the behavior of the Biden administration, because these are things that are known now. Now that their behavior is being exposed, now that the things that they do are being exposed, and it is being revealed who exactly these people are and what they do, they don't want to be held accountable for it. So they are, when they have the media come and try to get answers from them about problems that they've caused or things that they've done, then the media is the problem. The media, then they start to attack the media. Then they become worse than Donald Trump to an extent. This is something that we're going to see more and more of, because I believe, frankly, with this letter, it is a sign that the Biden administration does see a problem with the impeachment inquiry. The problem isn't that they're going to remove him from office, because I know that the Biden administration and the Democrats know that the Republicans aren't going to get the votes to, I mean, they're going to struggle to have votes to impeach him, right? But they're going to really struggle to, they're not going to get the votes for sure to remove him from office in the Senate. So that's not the issue. But what they have a problem with is the dirty laundry of President Biden and his family airing in public, and they're going to use every asset at their disposal in order to prevent that. And if that includes using the White House official, actual officials of the White House, I don't know whether the letter had stationery, I don't know whether it was from the official email of this official Ian Sams, but they're going to abuse every resource that they have in order to control the damage. And this is who President Biden is. He is a person who has used every single advantage over his life in order to make things better for him, and to basically game the system for his own personal gain. And look, I think that you should be concerned about this as an American. It doesn't matter whether you voted for one person or the other, or didn't vote at all, right? There have been many elections where I didn't even vote, right? For example, last year, okay, I voted in the primary and in the midterm election, but I didn't vote for a governor, for example, because I didn't think any. In fact, I think what I did, I wrote in my dog's name for governor. So basically, that's the equivalent of not voting, because I thought our governor is a piece of crap. So I don't think that you have to be a partisan person to understand really the problem with President Biden and how they're, not only what caused this impeachment inquiry, which is him. It's not the Republicans who caused it, because were it not for his actions, were it not for the things that Hunter Biden did and the things that Joe Biden colluded with him to do, which are illegal, okay, then the Republicans would not be looking to impeach him, okay? The big problem is also the way that they are reacting to it. They're basically behaving as if this is merely an exercise in political messaging, okay? Maybe that's the way that we ought to look at it nowadays, because they don't really have any ideals that they are protecting, right? The Democrats are not looking out for the poor or for the workers anymore. Now, they say that they are, but they are not, right? Because otherwise, why would we have one of the worst economies in recent memory? By the way, official statistics have come out that, I'm going to go on an economics tangent for a couple minutes here. Official statistics have come out that real wages declined in 2022 and poverty increased. There's two different metrics for poverty. One of them increased. And part of that is because there was a cancellation of one of the child tax credits that was being extended during COVID. So basically Americans, when the Biden administration was compelled finally to remove certain wasteful entitlements, they became poorer, right? So the reality is that they are holding this economy up on crutches, and they're using all sorts of creative incentives in order to try to tell people that they are doing better than they are, right? So they're for a long time they extended the eviction moratorium until finally the Supreme Court told them that they couldn't. For a long time they were, I think that they had mortgage forbearance. They were, and look, the Biden administration, I think that they've benefited from the fact that there are so many Americans who have short memories, and they don't know really how to assess who is the cause of their problems. Okay, I'm not going to tell you that the Republican Party has been on the ball on this. They've been terrible, right? The Republicans have been an abject failure. I can tell you that last year, okay, we're standing right now in the shadow of some very unconstitutional convictions due to January 6th of Owen Schroyer and Enrique Tarrio, and there's a third person whose name I never remember, but he was also one of these Proud Boys, and they were convicted on false pretenses. And last year, during the run-up to the midterm elections, a friend of mine dragged me to this event. It was a local Republican event where there was a member of the NRC, I think the RNC, the Republican National Committee. He came in order to basically give us a pep talk and say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're gonna win this election or whatever. So it was a very dry and ineffective presentation made by somebody who was clearly sent just to give an attaboy to the people in the field. And frankly, like the people that were there, I think, were largely looking for someone who could offer like an explanation for how things would be changing from 2020. And they gave time for questions and answers. And I think somewhere my wife actually recorded it. But I was so angry by what I listened to that I don't think really my questions really came through coherently, which is, I'm embarrassed to say. But the thrust of what I was saying was, how can you get up onto that podium and pretend that something has changed when you can see basically nothing has changed? There's been no effort to address all of the tampering with election processes that happened in 2020. There were many issues in terms of mail-in balloting that have not changed in other states, and there is there's censorship, and I went into the fact that they won't address the issue of the January 6th defendants because they're chicken. The Republican Party doesn't want to own up to the fact that because of their failure to uphold through their elected officials the laws that would keep the election free, fair, and lawful, that people decided to protest at the Capitol or protest in Washington, D.C., and then some of them went rogue and went to the Capitol and protested, but that they are not being respected in terms of their rights as criminal defendants. And he didn't want to answer it. He was basically like shrugging it off. And that is the attitude of the Republican Party. But that's really why I think that people like Ian Sams feel like they can do what they're doing. They feel like, oh, okay, so the Republicans have never really held anyone accountable when we do something that is clearly out of bounds, like what he did today. So I'm just going to go do it, and consequences be damned. Who cares? That is really my sense of why the Democrats basically are, they are the administration that they're the party, and they're the administration that believes that we don't have to actually do the job, because really we can run on the fact that the alternative is so terrible and so frightening, right? They're going to tell their core constituencies that having a Republican in office is so awful and will endanger them so much that they're going to run to the ballot box or send in their mail-in ballot just in order to avoid that. That's the real reason that I think they can behave that way. Look at what happened on Monday, okay? 9/11, solemn day, definitely meaningful for people of my generation that watched it in school happen in front of us. President Biden didn't even appear at any of the ceremonies at the attack sites at the Pentagon or at Ground Zero in New York. He was in Alaska. Why did they? What was the reason that they gave for it? Well, he wanted for it to be, he wanted to do it at the first place where he could be on U.S. soil after he was in this conference in Asia. So they decided that they would do the most expedient thing and go to Alaska. Well, why weren't they planning earlier in order to facilitate for him to be in either New York or Pennsylvania or Washington, D.C. on 9/11 in order to participate and really commemorate the lost lives of that tragic series of events, right? Nobody can explain that because nobody really wants to fess up to the fact that they do not care. So they've come up with all sorts of creative excuses. I think that there was another reason that was given. It was something like that. Oh yeah. So somebody asked one of the spokespeople at the White House why he wasn't at any of the 9/11 memorials at the attack sites, and they said, well, going back to Pearl Harbor, after 22 years, I think it's 22 years since then, as of Monday, you weren't having officials traveling all the way to Hawaii to commemorate Pearl Harbor. So that is how crass and lacking in real dignity the Biden administration is. I heard Dan Bongino comment on that, and he made like a point that was easy to understand. When it came to Pearl Harbor, the president would have had, especially back in the 50s and 60s, he would have had to travel to Hawaii. It's not always, convenient to travel to Hawaii. Even today probably wouldn't be. Whereas when it comes to the Pentagon, all he has to do is take a car ride down there from the White House. But he didn't even do that. So this is the administration that the media is defending, that the Democrats are they're trying to shoehorn back into office. And I am seeing a little bit of movement in terms of Democrats who are starting to say, hey, you know what? We've had enough of this. It's time for him to exit stage left, meaning President Biden. And what they're trying to say is he should leave office. He should basically say he's not running again, and use the premise that he is old enough to have already accomplished what he's accomplished. He has a good legislative record from when he was a senator. He has, obviously, when he was vice president, he was very active. And they'll say that he had a great record when he was president, which is not true. But they'll try to paint the picture that he's retiring because his mission and as both his mission in terms of public service and more specifically his mission in terms of why he set out to run for president are complete, and he's passing the baton to a younger generation. But really, what is true is that some of these Democrats are noticing that it's both the risk of him losing because he's obviously becoming more senile and decrepit with every day. He's making more and more ridiculous errors, and it's getting harder to hide them, right? Just like this weekend, he went on that bizarre tangent about the lying dog-faced pony soldier. Can you imagine what would have been the media reaction if it was President Bush who said that, if it was President Clinton, if it would have but only he gets this this group of journalists who really don't know how to intelligently analyze what they're seeing in front of their eyes. There's there was one article I saw. It was by Jim Newell. He's a very liberal editor. I think he's an editor, but I think more appropriately it'd be called a reporter. But Jim Newell writes for Slate. And Slate is obviously a very slanted, it should be called slant. It can't be because of concerns about how, the word slate would be considered, a slant would be considered bigoted. But anyway, Slate is definitely a liberal publication. And Jim Newell wrote an article where he was saying, yeah, really what Biden said doesn't make any sense at all. And he even said to the audience later that he's ready to go to bed. And he said, yeah, the Biden campaign should make sure that Biden is told not to tell people that he's going to bed. Well, you shouldn't have to tell a presidential candidate that. And this is going to be really the topic of a forthcoming article that I'm going to write, which is why it is that sometimes, in societies where and nations where you have real dysfunction in government and a lack of people talk about democracy, but really when there is a dictatorship and corruption, why sometimes they leave in office somebody who is either crazy or decrepit or old and senile. Places like Zimbabwe or there's plenty of examples out there of older and more decrepit individuals who were in power. The reason for this is because there are people who are the power behind the throne who have an interest in that person staying in power, because without them they would be nowhere. They don't have any of their own self value, right, in terms of the public, that would allow them to take power and do what the person that they're succeeding would should be doing. So they need them to remain in power. This is true especially of somebody like President Biden, but there's the person I think that is the biggest current office holder who reminds me of this, besides obviously people in the Senate like Dianne Feinstein and Mitch McConnell, is Mahmoud Abbas, who is the president of the Palestinian Authority. Now, why am I saying that? It's because, Mahmoud Abbas came into office. He was elderly already. And people were saying that he's basically just a compromised person who will be the bridge to a next generation, because by then he was already, there were already people within Palestinian politics who were 50, 60 years younger than him. Well, that was in 2004. It's now 2023, and he was elected one time, and there have been no new elections, and he remains in power. Why is that true? Well, the reason for that is because the people around Mahmoud Abbas, including officials that maybe would think of themselves as candidates to be president, they're too scared of the day after, because then all of them would be at each other's throats. There would be total bloodshed. And none of them have enough support among the public to seize power on their own and expect everyone else to be loyal to them. So that's one of the reasons that he remains in power. So I'm not going to say that that's exactly the situation that we have with Biden, but I think the analogy holds. When you have a person who is very weak and incompetent, who's at the top, then the people that surround him are able to feel secure that they can keep their job and have all the power that they have, because he needs them in order to be able to live day to day and do the job. Even though they're not doing the job, they're having other people do it in his name. So anyway, that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, please remember to go to the link tree in the description and click on it and Find me on all the different social media and video hosting sites, whether it's Rumble, BitChute, or Odyssey. My Substack newsletter is there, and so is my Subscribe Star in case you want to donate. And have a great day.